Jessa Jones, repair expert and owner of iPad Rehab in Mendon, New York, can fix just about anything. But these days, she finds herself spending more time fixing one thing in particular. Every month, more and more iPhone 6 and 6 Plus devices show up at her shop with the same problem. A gray flickering bar at the top of the display and an unresponsive touchscreen. What started as an unfortunate trend now seems to be growing into an epidemic, so we went right to the source to learn more about what Jessa calls the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus Touch IC disease.
Maybe 3 months after the iPhone 6 Plus came out, people started saying, hey, have you ever seen this really characteristic 6 Plus with at the top of the phone kind of some flashing gray bars, and people noticed that the flashing gray bars correlated with a loss of touch function. And then people started wondering, what was up with that, because if you changed the screen, sometimes touch would come back, but then it would go away again. And it was this sort of really kind of mind-boggling problem. iPhones have been using the same two integrated circuit chips on the board for a long time to control touch function. And like any other board repair, you can kind of work through that circuit. So we could look at the connector and see connector damage, and then we could look and see that circuit and follow it all the way back to the touch IC chips, and sometimes they would fail. And we've been replacing them for years in earlier phones. So it would be very natural to see this sort of flashing gray bars phenomenon that seemed to be correlated with no touch, that when the connector's good, the power is there for the line, everything checks out, that it would be a defect of the integrated circuit chip, the touch IC chips. As we saw more and more phones, the community saw more and more phones, were sharing information and kind of collecting observations, the picture really began to develop over time. So the earlier phones are different than the iPhone 6 Plus and the iPhone 6 in a couple of different ways regarding the touch ICs and the touch IC area. So here is an iPhone 5S. And iPhone 5Ss don't really get touch IC disease. Sure, sometimes they lose touch, but it's, a typical problem that you see every now and then. It's not a rampant epidemic. And what I want you to just sort of appreciate is that there is a metal shield all the way down this board. And that gives the board some flexibility. And now let's compare that to the iPhone 6 Plus. So this is covered with a sticker shield. So it's not a tough metal, rigid shield here. It's just a sticker. And, we can only guess and hypothesize as to why that change was made. The other change that was made, if you look at some of the earlier phones, like the iPhone 5C, the touch ICs in the iPhone 5C, there's a substance called underfill that is injected as a liquid that squeezes under in between all of those solder balls, and then it's cured to sort of a rock-hard kind of electronic super glue-like stuff. And that really gives, sort of anchors and supports the touch IC connection to the board around all the little marbles of the solder balls. And now we've got this sort of, combination of problems where the touch ICs are on the board in a section of the board that no longer has the rigid metal shield. And the touch ICs are anchored to the board, but they don't have the support of that underfill. So that's sort of like two strikes against them. And then the board itself, the 6 Plus, is put into a great big gigantic phone, and it's kind of bendy. It just is. If you're a back pocket carrier, this thing is going to, conform a little bit to the shape of your butt. And when it does that, that puts stress on the board itself. And that's what we think is causing a separation between the touch IC chip on top and the little solder balls that it sits on that anchor it to the board. So what is the solution? In our view, you have to have the chips replaced. So replacing the chips, prepping the pads with flux, heating up the pads and prepping them to accept solder, applying new chips, and then finishing that off with a metal shield on top that maybe should have been there from the beginning, but now we're going to add that to sort of future-proof the design. And then when we send those back out, it has a much more sort of robust and lasting result. So as the 6 Plus ages, the problem is becoming more and more rampant. So that my entire business a year ago, Touch IC phones were very rare. They would have been all under warranty. We wouldn't see them very much. Today, when the mail comes in, probably half of the phones that we're getting in every day have this one problem. In our case, when we started adding a shield to the back of the phone, now we will solder a metal shield on the back of the phone. That really seems to have helped with the sort of long-term robustness of the repair. When I go to the Apple support community forums and I try to just sort of raise awareness about this problem, I've personally been banned from the Apple support community 3 times for sharing this kind of information that I think everyone should know about. Apple support community forums is the #1 Google hit for iPhone repair, and it always will be. And they are systematically deleting any posts that I make that sort of references the underlying cause, and it's it really stinks. There was a time where I thought that error 53 was the worst thing that Apple had ever done, was the biggest problem, and affected who knows, hundreds of thousands, millions of phones, we don't know. And I remember thinking, if the world found out about error 53, that would be a really big deal. And I think that error 53 pales in comparison to how widespread the epidemic of Touch IC disease in the iPhone 6 Plus.
We'll be keeping an eye on this problem and updating you with all the newest info we have. So make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter @iFixit and give us a like on Facebook.